Whether you're hitting the road or kicking back in the cab, it's time to take a load off with Big Rig Banter. Powered by alltruckjobs.com, your source for finding the trucking jobs drivers really want. Get ready to shift into gear and let the conversations roll.
Hey truckers, welcome to the latest episode of Big Rig Banter. I'm your new host Maggie, and I'm super excited to be here. First things first, you're probably wondering who I am and what happened to the other hosts. Big Rig Banter has a lot of changes coming for the end of 2020 and beginning of 2021, so stick around to the end of the episode where I'll dive into more detail about what changes are coming our way. In the meantime, let's jump right into today's episode. Today, we're talking with Kerry from the DAT all about getting your own authority. Let's dive in.
All right, so I'm here today with Kerry from the DAT. Kerry, how are you today?
Doing very well. How are you?
Pretty good. Kerry is joining us on the podcast to talk about getting your own authority. But before we jump into that, Kerry, do you want to just introduce yourself to our listeners, with your title and then how long you've worked in the trucking industry and just a little bit about what your job role entails?
Sure. So my name is Kerry Puff, and I'm employed with the DAT, and I'm part of a team that does regulatory consulting for new trucking companies, new broker companies. We help set up the companies so that they can become independent. All these owner-operators out there, if they're looking to become independent, that's what we do. We help them with all of the regulatory paperwork and, yeah.
So for those listening and thinking about becoming an owner-operator, going independent, we use the word authority. Can you just kind of break down for our listeners exactly what that means when we say that?
So the federal government regulates everything in transportation.
Right.
So your authority is basically getting permission to run across the country in a truck, as it were. So, and it depends on, the type of trucks that you're going to be running. And of course you have to, go through the federal government in order to do this. So they have their own process, and we help you through that.
And so, what are some of the pros and cons to getting permission to do this versus remaining a company driver?
Not too many cons right now.
Okay.
You will be paying your own full commercial trucking liability and cargo insurance, whereas if you were leased on, you're paying a portion of it as opposed to the entire thing usually. So that's an added expense. So I always recommend you get a quote on the insurance before you start this process anyway. Once you start, most people are extremely happy.
So even though that's an added expense, I guess if we dove into the pros, you would say you have the potential to make more money. So it kind of, in the long run, probably, balances out.
Yes, you are keeping all of your money as opposed to paying a percentage to the company that you're leased to. So that's a big pro. You also get to choose where you want to run. The value there is huge for drivers who want to be independent.
Yeah, so you can pick your own route and schedule and to some extent, and then also the kind of freight that you haul. Do you notice that there's a certain freight type that is more lucrative or more popular with owner-operators?
That is going to fluctuate from season to season throughout the year.
Okay, that makes sense.
And yeah, it's going to fluctuate. So most in the winter time, you're going to see a lot more reefer freight moving. In the springtime and summertime, you're going to see a lot more flatbed freight. Dry van freight's always running.
Right.
It's always running at all times.
So you kind of said there were no cons right now. I'm guessing that has to do with COVID and the current economic climate, or is there something else contributing to the fact that there are, no downside right now? Or
right now, the freight rates are fantastic.
Okay.
So with the coronavirus out there, it has kind of incentivized a lot of the truckers to go independent just because of the upward trend of the freight rates. Even for dry van freight, it's fantastic. There's more freight running right now because there's more need for product to be on the shelf right now.
All that aside, if we were in, I guess, more normal trending times, freight costs and prices fluctuating could be a con to getting your own authority.
They're always going to fluctuate, kind of depending on what's happening in the country. And that's just standard for the industry. It's always going to have its ups and downs.
Right. So for someone who is just starting out in the process to get their own authority, what kind of tips would you give them? Or maybe we can just go through the steps that a person would take.
So you would need to have your business registered in your state, and you would need to be looking for a truck. You don't actually have to have your truck in order to start the authority.
Okay.
But if you already have your truck, it's a little bit easier to get an idea of what the insurance is going to run. I always recommend at least getting an idea of the insurance cost so that you're not caught unaware of the high fees that you're going to pay for insurance.
Yeah.
Because you definitely need to make sure that that's covered first.
I don't know if you can speak to this, but does insurance fluctuate or go up and down based on if you have a brand new truck versus a used rig, or what kind of things can keep that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty standard. If you've got a brand new 2020 rig, you're going to be having to cover replacement value on a much higher dollar value than you would if it's a used truck.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So, that's going to affect your insurance rates a lot, actually.
And the used trucks are probably more affordable for someone starting out, but then obviously you have are they going to break down more, and all of that stuff.
One thing good about tractor trailers, though, they're built tough. They really are. So they're built to last. If they're taken care of well, they'll last a good long time. So that's a very good thing.
Yeah, my dad actually is a mechanic. He works on tractor trailer trucks, so I get to hear all the ins and outs of that, and also how they've changed over the years. But yeah, they're definitely not like our cars when you think of it from that perspective.
Absolutely.
How long does the process take to get your own authority?
So that is also going to fluctuate depending on where you're located in the country. So some states we can do it fairly quickly, typically around 4, 5.5 weeks.
Okay.
Some areas takes a little bit longer, and it could take up to 12 to 16 weeks depending on where you're located.
Sure. And what kind of things do they ask you, or are they looking for? I mean, I guess number one, you have to have your CDL.
So not for all trucking authorities are going to be required to have a CDL.
Okay.
The equipment that you're running is going to determine whether or not you need a CDL. But for the tractor trailer drivers, yes, all CDL certifications for all drivers. And then for that equipment, not only do you need your federal authority, some states require an intra-state for their own particular state.
Okay.
And then you also need to get certain items from that state, the apportion tag and your IFTA account, and you've got certain mileage permits for the country. New York, New Mexico, Kentucky, Oregon, those are all permitted states because they didn't participate in IFTA.
Okay. And
so
what
those would be extra permits that you would have to get.
Sure. And what is IFTA, just to clarify?
International Fuel Tax Agreement.
Okay.
So that way you're not having to stop in each state to fuel up. It works out at the end of the quarter.
Is there anything else that you think is important to mention about getting your own authority?
So research is key.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you want to make sure that you are prepared for overall startup cost. So you're going to want to do your research on your particular state and what things are going to run you, because not each state is going to be the same.
Right.
So the overall startup cost is going to fluctuate. And for an overall startup cost for any new authority for a tractor trailer, you're probably going to be between $4,000 and $6,500 out of pocket, and that's all going to be before insurance.
Right.
So it depends on your state to find out where you are as far as out-of-pocket expenses, and then just make sure that you're aware of the new bylaws. Being able to pass the federal safety audit, which is required. Being able to make sure that you're tracking all the right information, that you understand ELD laws and rules.
Right, that's a big one.
There's a lot of federal filings and a lot of federal requirements for truckers, and we basically will walk you through these details to make sure that you're aware of it. But if you do your research ahead of time, you're one step ahead of the game for sure.
Right. Is there a cap on authorities? So do certain states limit how many people can have their authority or anything like that?
No, no. So the states will handle their intrastate and their requirements for apportion plates and
Okay.
IFTA accounts, and that's very big for the states because that's added revenue for each state. So you really do have to be careful and adhere to the state laws as
Right.
well as the federal laws.
Yeah.
And the federal government, they're going to vet every brand new authority as part of the process.
Of course. What are some hiccups that you find that people run into going through that process? Or like what are the most common things that people miss or that maybe get rejected?
The number one item that people they don't take into account is the insurance.
Right.
That's kind of why I stress it.
Yeah.
So if you start the authority process and then you find out after the fact that you cannot afford the down payment and the monthly fees for the insurance, the money is spent. The federal government has your money.
Right.
So it's one of those things where you do want to know that you've got your bases covered before you start spending money on this process.
And
and kind of have a good understanding for it.
Right. Where would one go to research just that specifically, that insurance portion, and find out what the cost might look like?
You've got a lot of commercial insurance companies that will quote commercial insurance.
Right.
So you would go to those companies, and there's going to be Progressive is probably one of the bigger insurance companies, but I prefer usually working with insurance brokers. They tend to get really good discounts and deals, especially once you have a history with them.
Right, that makes sense.
So start with your own insurance company, and of course, if you need referrals, I will always provide them.
Awesome, Kerry. And how can someone get in touch with you if they have more questions about this process?
There's several different ways. We have our direct contact telephone numbers, and you can also go to dat.com to the main website. There's a link there for authority where you can contact one of the authority reps here in the division.
Awesome. And I know you said like right now is a great time to get your own authority. Do you see because we're coming towards the end of the year here already, which is just crazy to me, but do you see that trend continuing into 2021 or, how often do these things fluctuate or how quickly?
So authority stays pretty steady.
Okay, cool.
It stays pretty steady. We have seen an uptick in authority throughout this coronavirus just because there's more need. We are probably more than 100,000 drivers short of where we need to be in the country for independent owner-operators. We need to add more truckers on the road. If you look at the highways, you probably wouldn't think that, but we do need more truckers on the road.
Yeah.
If you think about the fact that there's nothing that you pick up on a day-to-day basis that has not been inside of a truck. Nothing. Everything is being delivered by trucks. So we need more truckers on the road, and we do have a lot of freight that is waiting for truckers to come get it.
Yeah.
Because of our shortage in truckers.
So it's a good time to get on it if you can. Biggest thing is just coming up with that money and making sure you go through the process and do your research thoroughly. If we had to recap that, yeah.
The reason why our services are sought after is because not only do we help you with the federal filings, which can be kind of daunting, but we guide you through the process as far as any of the solicitation that you're going to be getting because you've now put your information on a public website.
Right.
So you'll get a lot of solicitation there. So we help you with all of that, kind of guide you through that process so that you're not, dealing with scammers. Helping you with referrals for all sorts of different companies, factoring companies, insurance companies, electronic log devices. So there's a lot of different services that we can help you with. And DAT can also help you with IFTA reporting and load board services as well, because that's what we're known for.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we did interview someone from DAT a few months ago about load boards. So I'll also include a link in the podcast notes to that previous episode as well. We really appreciate all the information you provide to our listeners too.
Excellent. I'd be happy to add any information should you need it.
All right, awesome, Kerry. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to jump on this call with me.
Sure, you got it, Lenay. Thank you so much for having me.
And a big thanks again to Kerry for coming on the podcast today to teach us all about getting our own authority. If you're interested in more information on how to get your own authority, be sure to check out our show notes for tips and resources. Next up, we're going to be talking about the future of Big Rig Banter. As all of you know, COVID has made 2020 one heck of a year. Because of that, Big Rig Banter decided to take this as an opportunity to change up our podcast and find a better way of doing things. Among those things include a new host, that's me, and changing the frequency of our episodes. While our hope is to still continue to produce amazing, insightful information, it will likely be on a less frequent basis. So what does that mean for our listeners? As your new host, I'm really interested in hearing suggestions on topic ideas, names of industry experts to bring on the show, and any other recommendations you might have to make this show even better. So, how can you get a hold of me? Well, there's a couple of ways. First, you can send me an email at podcast@bigrigbanter.com, or you can use the hashtag BigRigBanter on all of our social media accounts. As soon as you send me a message, I'll get right back to you. It's been a blast chatting with you guys today, and I can't wait to see where Big Rig Banter is headed next. Until next time, keep on trucking.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Big Rig Banter. For your next job, check out alltruckjobs.com, the premier online source for finding the best driver jobs in the country. Browse hundreds of positions by freight or driver type to get back on the road with confidence. Click subscribe to keep the conversations coming. Until next time on Big Rig Banter.